Hello, friends, and welcome to Episode 7 of Symbolic Sorcery. Tonight's show is about Tarot Key 1, the Magician. We're going to be giving a detailed analysis of the meanings of the Magician and how it relates to the rest of the tarot. We're going to be doing a live meditation on the Magician later on in the hour, but just a few announcements, since it has been about a month since we've done a show. And if you were following along with what we were, the flow of where things were going, we were talking a lot about the net, the idea of the net, and what the net is basically a topological and geometric representation of our subconsciousness. And we looked at what this means in terms of alchemy, how we can change our net into a divine pattern. We're going to be sort of departing from that theme of discussing the net in as much specificity as it was before. We're going to be going into the Magician tonight, and I will relate it back to some of those net concepts as we go through, but mostly it's going to be an analysis of the Magician card itself and how it fits into the whole tarot sequence. So, if you had been with us on the very first episode of Symbolic Sorcery, we talked about how to read and understand the esoteric language of symbols. And the net is this. It's a representation of relationships between symbols. Every point on the net is a specific symbol, and the relations between symbols are the connections between the points in the net. Those are the lines of the net, and the symbols themselves are the points on the net. How this ties into the Magician is that, well, you have the number 1, first of all. The points on the net, that pointedness, that's the oneness, and that's basically the idea of the Magician. And it's mostly brought out through the number 1 and the letter Beth, which means house. And so we're going to be going into that as we go through the show tonight. So just a few quick announcements. It looks like we have some people joining us in the chat. Occult Talk, Johnny, some shout-outs to you guys who are with us tonight. Red Shifty is also here. So I'm glad to see that we have some good friends with us on the show tonight. And I had meant to give some more details on some of the aspects of the show. Now, we are on the Blog Talk Network, and it's going to really help out our show if you would add us to your favorites on Blog Talk. Occult Talk is writing in the chat that there's lots of people listening that aren't in the chat, and I guess I don't always realize that sometimes. So if you are listening tonight and you're not in the chat, you can go to the Blog Talk website and register, sign in with an account, and you'll be able to get in with our chat that we have going live on the show. Okay. Now, what I had wanted to say about that was, if you would please add us to your favorites, and that really helps out with the exposure of our show. And I had also wanted to say that we're going to be looking at Tarot Key number 1, the Magician, tonight. And so it would really, really help if you would have the picture of the magician out in front of you as you're listening to the show tonight. So why don't you just take a few minutes and then go and grab tarot key number 1, the magician, if you have it. If not, do this. Go to my file server page. It is mediafire.com/symbolic sorcery, all one word. Again, that's mediafire.com/symbolic sorcery. And you'll see on there I've uploaded a bunch of files. If you go into the Tarot Keys section, click on the magician and go to show full screen or whatever the option is there to get it as big as you can, and have that picture up on your screen as we go through the show tonight. It's really, really going to help you in understanding these concepts and what I'm talking about here. Now, what we're going to be looking at is the BOTA version of the Magician card. And if some of you are familiar with the Rider-Waite-Smith version of the Magician, it's pretty close to what we have in the BOTA, but there's some minor details that when we see what these details are saying, there's actually some, what we could say, some blinds or concealments in the Waite version of the Magician card. So if we look at the BOTA version of the Magician card, one of the main differences we find there is that the table is on the right side of the picture, and the magician is looking down in the sense of he's looking at what he's pointing at. And that's important because the card is all about attention and concentration, self-awareness, this objective mind consciousness that we use to look at and read and perceive the objects in our environment. That's what the whole symbolism of the magician is about objective consciousness. But in the Waite version of the magician is actually looking out at the viewer of the card, and that is not quite as good as we would like. It would, if we're going to be using these cards for meditation and not so much for doing readings, we want to have the most perfected, detailed symbolism that was designed by true masters and adepts of tarot. And the BOTA version of the tarot was designed by Paul Foster Case, who was, by all means, a tarot master. Paul Foster Case, as some of you may know, founded the Builders of the Adytum organization and created the BOTA tarot specifically for this organization. Now, the way the BOTA tarot works, if you join the BOTA, you will get the cards in black and white outline only to be colored in as part of the work to go along with the lessons that are given out on the tarot. And I will say this, that it's very important that we color our own cards and that we create our own tarot deck, because what that does is it links the outer physical object with our internal subconscious, sort of divine source from within. We have now a connection more directly, something we've created, something we've worked on, something we've put our hand and labor into. We have a connection with what's outside with what's inside, and that's extremely important to have if you want to go as deep as you can into the tarot, which is what we are all about on this show here. Now, some of you may notice the intro music that we had tonight. That was Steve Roach that was Space-Time Continuum with Stephen Kent on the didgeridoo. Now, the reason I like that as an intro clip is because it's very shamanic. The didgeridoo, the drony sound there, because we want to understand that when we're examining and exploring the tarot, we are truly going into the deep, deep realms of the subconscious, this shamanic journeying, almost you could say, into our subconsciousness through the images of the tarot. And what we're really doing here on this show is we're almost going to be doing a shamanic journey into the Magician card tonight. So without further ado, let's get going on what the Magician card is all about. Now, the Magician card, first of all, is the number 1. Now, the reason we look at numbers, we look at it in this way: numbers, letters, and words. That comes from the very first chapter of the Kabbalistic book known as the Sepher Yetzirah, or the Book of Formation. Now, it says in the very first verse of Sepher Yetzirah that the Lord created the universe with numbers, letters, and words. And this is exactly what we have in the tarot. Each tarot card has a number. Each of the major arcana also has a Hebrew letter, and the word is the title of the card. So here we have the number 1, the Hebrew letter Beth, and the title, the Magician. So these are the numbers, letters, and words that begin our analysis of each of the tarot cards. Now, the number 1 is a symbol of beginnings. We also know that any time something begins, it begins with 1, and the number 1 is the beginning of the number sequence. So anything related to beginning something, you're starting some new project or something like that, that's really related to the Magician. Any kind of new ideas or inspirations you get, that's kind of tied into the Magician in the sense of beginning something new. Now, the reason this is tied into self-consciousness and self-awareness is because we're doing this all the time. Anytime we pay attention to something, that's a new beginning of a conscious development from that moment of our attention. And this is going on all the time, like I said. So the number 1 makes us think of unity and wholeness, but really wholeness isn't what's shown here by the Magician. Really, it's the idea of oneness as singularity, as one-pointedness. And geometrically, we have the point. So really, the Fool is like the circle, but the Magician is the central point of that circle. And so the Fool is the limitless power, and that's the circle, the all. And this power concentrates itself at a point whenever it begins a sequence of manifestation. And this is what's tied in here with the number 1 on the Magician. Now, we want to understand that the unity that is symbolized by the Magician is really a relative unity. If you look at the digit for the number 1, it is just a vertical stroke. And so it has an above and a below. And it shows there that there's a kind of hidden duality within the 1. And what it means is this. If we think of the 1, the number 1, as the point, that's our attention. Our attention is always on some specific point. But we don't have to pay attention to the same thing all the time. We can shift our attention from one thing to another. That's the idea of relative unity, that we can have one-pointed concentration on any object, but it doesn't matter what object it is. And so this is the relativeness of the unity in the number 1 in the Magician. Now, the letter Beth is, by gematria, the number 2. And so isn't it strange that the Magician is numbered 1, and the letter Beth is the number 2 by gematria? So what we have there is the 1 and the 2 with the number 1 and the 2 with the letter Beth. And that's the idea there that the oneness, the unity of the magician is really a relative unity, because it's related to that we can pay attention to anything we want with one pointed awareness of the object of our attention. So the letter Beth, as some of you may know, each Hebrew letter has a physical object associated with it. And the reason for this is so that we can start to train our consciousness to recognize the spiritual aspects of everyday things. Now, with the letter Beth, the physical object associated there is a house. And so we want to think about, what does the idea of a house have to do with what's shown in the magician card? Well, kind of scratch your head a little bit and do some meditation. Here's one thing. Anything, well, okay, first this. A house is a fixed location. Anytime we're paying attention to something, our attention is held at a fixed location. So anytime we're paying attention to something, the object of our attention is the house that our life power is living in for the duration of that attention. And also, that any object in a house also has a fixed location. So you think of like the refrigerator, the kitchen sink, those don't go anywhere, those don't change. And so if we tie this into the idea of concentration, when we're concentrating, our awareness isn't changing, it's fixed on one specific object. Other things tied into the house are is that you have now a distinction between inside and outside. So the idea of a house really is this compact space in which life experience is being played out. So there's lots of things you could do with meditating on the house, and this is basically how you can do meditations on the Hebrew letters, is just to close your eyes and go into a meditative state and think of anything you can that's associated to the idea of a house. And whatever you think of, try to relate that to self-consciousness and awareness and attention. What you end up doing is accessing the secret wisdom that is hidden within you and bringing it closer to the surface so that you can bring these wisdom teachings and awarenesses out so that you can be aware of these principles and how they're playing out through your life experience. So there's lots of correspondences with the letter Beth that we could look at. Not just the house. There's the path on the tree of life, which is called the intelligence of transparency. And on the tree of life, the magician is between Kether and Bina, which is Kether is the number 1 and Bina is number 3. And so the magician comes down from the crown into understanding, which is Bina. And so the path there is called the intelligence of transparency. And so something very important is being said there with the idea of transparency. If we look at the magician card, we see that he is holding one hand up and the other hand is pointing down. The right hand is held up with the wand and the other hand pointing down. What's showing here, if we connect this to the idea of transparency, is that the life force is flowing through the magician. He's not generating the power from within. The power is coming from above through him to whatever he's paying attention to, and that is now something that acts as a suggestion or a seed idea that gets planted in subconsciousness, which is why we see the flowers, the idea of a garden in the magician. So also the idea here with the flowers and how that ties into the house, think of it as this. You see the green coloring on the leaves of the flowers. Now the green ties into the Empress card. And on the Empress card we see all sorts of growth. There's trees in the background, there's ripening wheat in the foreground. So the Empress is all about growth. And so the magician is really closely related to the Empress, and you can also see that other ways. If you look at the symbol for Mercury, it's very close to the symbol for Venus. And the spheres of Mercury and Venus are on the same level on the Tree of Life. So what is being told here with the flowers, the plants in the Magician card is this, that our mental imagery, that's the flowers, the plants, our mental imagery is our house of life. And anything we can find in our environment first started out as mental imagery. So do this as an exercise. Go through your house and just pick up objects at random and try to see where the origin of that object is. If you go back to the root origins, you'll find that it started off with mental imagery. And mental imagery always related to some sort of desire or will, and that's the red roses that we see in the Magician card. It's about will and desire. So really, all objects in our environment started off from some sort of desire that carried out through mental imagery as sort of a growth process, and then became manifested as actual things in our environment. So some other things about the idea of Beth. In the old version of the Hebrew letters, Beth was a arrowhead. It wasn't the house. They changed it, but you still get the same idea. And they sort of explain each other. So the arrowhead is suggesting things like sharpness and that point, that tip point of the arrowhead, which is to pierce through surfaces. The idea here is this, that when we become perfectly concentrated on some physical object, when we become aware of the objects in our environment and then concentrate on them as shown in the Magician card, that acts like an arrowhead that pierces through the surface appearances into the inner essence of those objects. And so we actually learn the hidden side of things through concentration. So some of the other correspondences to Beth, as given in the Sepher Yetzirah, are Mercury, the planet Mercury. It is the path on the Tree of Life called the intelligence of transparency, which joins Kether to Bina. On the cube of space, it's the direction above. And it's also corresponding to the function of life and death. Now that's a double function because Beth is a double letter, and it actually has a double sound, the hard B, the B, and the sort of soft B, which is sort of like a V, almost like a V sound. And so it's called a double letter, and it has a double function of life and death. Now what we do with each of these correspondences is go into a meditation and see what the relationship is between those correspondences and what's shown in the Magician card, or any of the tarot cards we could do that with as well. So we're going to do a little bit of a meditation later on the letter Beth. There's going to be a reading from the Sepher Yetzirah, and we're going to do a meditation on the Book of Tokens. Okay, so that was some basic things. We had the number 1, the letter Beth, and the title of the Magician. Now, we haven't really spent too much time on that title because magic is such an incredibly vast topic that there's no way we could cover even the rudiments of magic as it's understood in the esoteric sense, which is what is meant by the title, the Magician, and the card. But basically, we could think of it as this, that every act of attention is truly an act of magic. What we're doing with the Magician card is teaching our subconsciousness this truth through the language of pictorial symbolism, which is the language of subconsciousness. So if we want to tell our subconsciousness that anytime we're paying attention, that it's truly an act of magic, then we would want to meditate on tarot key number 1, the Magician. And that message would be conveyed to our subconscious mind through looking at the Magician. Yes, folks, as simple as looking at the cards. Why is that? Because, as I just said, every act of attention is an act of magic. So when you're paying attention, when you're looking at your tarot cards, that is an act of magic. You're planting seed ideas in your subconsciousness, which will grow into fruition, which is the true wisdom which is hidden inside each of us. How do we bring that out? All we have to do is look at the cards. It's as simple as that. But like I said before, that requires a lot of disciplined, regular practice. It's really the only way to do it. And why people give up after, you can't do this after, a day. You're not going to get the deep wisdom from within for just looking at the Magician for one day. You need to crystallize this thought form into your subconsciousness so your subconscious can use this as a model to manifest thoughts and ideas and bring out that wisdom to you in that manner. And so when we understand this, we really see that we're all true magicians, and we're doing magic all the time. Okay, so that's with the title now. I'm just looking in the chat. So I haven't been focusing on the chat here because I've been wanting to talk about the card with what I had written. So Occult Talk is here, Red Shifty is here, Dynamic Spirit is here, and so there's just a lot of great chat going on tonight. So I just want to thank everyone who's here. Now, there is so much more we could do with the Magician. There's really no way we could cover it all in an hour. We could really do a series of shows on each of the aspects of the Magician, but I think it's best to just go through and give you some teachings that will help you so that when you start looking at the Magician, you can start studying these cards and understanding the esoteric meaning of the symbols, and start using these to enhance your consciousness of attention and concentration. So this is really the alchemical aspect of tarot, that when we internalize the cards, when we crystallize these thought forms, that is an alchemical transformation in our consciousness that actually, in this example, would make us better at the skill of concentration. So if you have, wandering attention, or, people say attention deficit disorder, whatever that means, it just means you have wandering attention, and you need to train yourself how to pay attention. The best way to do that is to start with concentration exercises on tarot key number 1, the Magician. And so concentration exercises are very simple, but it just requires a lot of discipline and a lot of perseverance. So all we do when we're doing a concentration exercise is you're looking at the card, and anytime you get some sort of thought that's unrelated to the card, you just bring your attention back to the card. That's all you have to do. Now you have to do this, you can start off with just sort of like that, but really when you want to go deeper into concentration, you want to really rouse up your will and your desire. And that's what's shown by the red roses on the card. That we want to arouse our willpower to concentrate and focus for a duration of time on a specific image. And when we work with the tarot cards, there's an actual alchemical process of transformation, of internalizing these cards, so that once we've internalized the symbolism of the magician, once we've integrated it into our psyche, once we've ingrained these pictures into our subconsciousness, what actually happens then is that we become more skilled at concentration. And I would recommend that everyone start with these exercises on the tarot. Now, each of the tarot cards has an alchemical interpretation like this, but the magician is really the most important, because if we're going to internalize the other tarot cards, we need to use our concentration. So we really begin with the magician, number one, beginning. We begin with the magician, concentration. We look at the cards, we concentrate on them for a duration of time. What happens then is that we're impressing these images, we're sending them off as suggestions and planting seeds in our subconsciousness that grow into fruition. Like I said, that's the wisdom that is hidden within each one of us. Now, we all have access to this. It's just a matter of spending time with the cards and being patient, pretty much. So there's so many lessons that are in this card, just in terms of general wisdom. And I'm really trying to bring out on the show here things that I've discovered on my own, through my own meditations, and not what I've read in books. Now, I have read and studied lessons on the tarot, and those have been incredibly, incredibly helpful in getting up to speed on these basic ideas. But then also, once you go beyond that, you start meditating with the cards, building on your lessons, and then you start getting all these intuitions. That becomes your, your inner tarot that you bring out. So every time you look at the cards, it's like, you almost think of it as like each tarot card is a house. And you bring out these houses, and we live in these houses for the duration of our attention while we're looking at them. And once we've built these up inside, we can go back to them. It's basically just a matter of opening the door. So one of the most important lessons about the magician and what's shown in the symbolism is we see his right hand raised, holding a wand, and the left hand pointing down. Now, this is a reminder of the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, as below, so above. So what's shown here in this symbolism is the limitless life power of the Fool is above. That's above the magician. Sort of that wand he's holding is really the power of the Fool. This power flows down through him, and at this point of concentration, symbolized by the pointing finger on the left hand, this pointedness is like a seed that gets planted in subconsciousness, which will later grow, and that's why we see the plants in the magician card. So the importance there with the plants and the flowers is that the magician is really cultivating mental imagery. That's the idea of the flowers there. The magician is a gardener. And if we think about esoteric teachings about gardens, obviously there's the Garden of Eden. Now, if we think about what some of the deeper esoteric meanings of the magician are, is it ties into the planet Mercury, which is actually, in terms of the chakras, that's our crown chakra. And if we look at how the magician has the simple white headband sort of as the very basic idea of a crown there, just this little circlet that goes around the head. That's sort of the idea there about, with the head. So what's happening is that our pineal gland at the center of our brain is sort of what we think of as the Garden of Eden. So if we could get into our consciousness of an activated pineal gland, that's what's meant by the Garden of Eden. Now we see this as the magician is standing in the garden because the correspondence there to the crown chakra, the pineal gland, and the Garden of Eden. So there's some deep alchemical meanings there. I'm just looking at the time here, and we've got about 25 minutes left. So I'm going to try to wrap it up on the teachings of the magician, and so we can do our meditation tonight. But like I said, I have the magician card out in front of me. There's so much we could look at. There's no way we could cover it all. Now, some things that I'm going to just mention briefly. This is just basically going to be planting seeds in your consciousness so that you can develop these ideas later on. What is the function of the flower in terms of a plant? It's the reproductive organs of the plant. Now, tie this into mental imagery in our own reproductive organs. What this is saying, basically, is that the energy that gets normally expressed in the reproductive functions of the human being is what gets sublimated in acts of concentration. So this same force that gets used in reproduction is actually lifted up from the lower chakras up to the crown chakra during acts of awareness. And that's why we see the infinity sign above the magician's head showing that vibration, that prana, that Shakti force lifting up and going above the head. And so this is showing when we concentrate on these cards that we're actually raising the Kundalini force. That's the serpent power, so we see the serpent belt on the magician going up above the head and bringing this illumination that we see shown in the card here. Now we see roses, and so the color red is about desire and so on. But we also see the white lilies. Now the white lilies are about abstract thinking, considerations apart from desires. Now the white lilies have 6 petals, and so are a symbol of the number 6. Number 6 is about the macrocosmic forces, the forces of chemistry and physics and so on, whereas the flowers are really symbols of desire, and the rose. The rose has multiples of 5 petals, and so the rose symbolizes the number 5. And the number 5 ties into Mars with the 5th Sephiroth and the Tree of Life, and the color red there as well. Now, if you can tie this into what I just mentioned about the reproductive function, then you're already doing well with your alchemical understandings of the tarot. Also, looking at the at the magician card, we see the workbench or the table and the 4 magical implements of the wand, the cup, the sword, and the pentacle. Now, as you may know, these 4 magical implements symbolize the 4 elements and also the 4 letters of the divine name of the Tetragrammaton in the Kabbalah. Now, if we have these 4 together, these elements, fire, water, air, and earth, ties into the 4 letters of the Tetragrammaton, Yod, He, Vav, He. And so when we look at the implements on the magician's table, we should really be thinking of Yod, He, Vav, He. And so these implements are showing us the power of the word, and that we don't normally understand the power that words have in terms of magical tools. And we really want to understand words as being our most powerful magical tools. And the words we say about ourselves and the interpretations we give to our experiences are what builds our house of life. So we really want to be careful with what we pay attention to. And so before the show, I really wanted to make sure that I expressed that really the most important teaching that you can take away from this lesson tonight on the Magician card is this, that we have to be very, very careful with what we pay attention to. Because, like I said, every act of attention is an act of magic. Every act of attention is a suggestion that gets planted as a seed idea in our subconsciousness, which, like I said, will grow and come into fruition. So we don't want to be planting seed ideas related to our own misery, our own helplessness. We don't want to concentrate on negativity at all. And so some people hear that and they say, well, I just want to face the facts. I want to be realistic, and if things aren't going well, then I'm going to admit it. And I say, maybe you know what the facts are, but you want to turn that around. You want to do it in a different way and start focusing on the positive expression of how that could come about. And even if you have a negative situation, what you can do is try to find the positive. What eventually happens when you start concentrating on the positive, this is the life and death function of the magician. You're paying attention to the positive things, so you're giving your life force to those positive things. What that means is you're not giving your life force to the negative detrimental things. And so that's death to the negative detrimental things. This is really the most important lesson of the magician, is that we have to be extremely, extremely careful with what we choose to hold our attention on. And that we don't want to engage in meaningless chatter because it spreads our forces all over the place. Really, we want to do this. We want to have one aim. We want to have one desire that we want to manifest, and keep focusing on this so that during times of the day when we're, say, standing in line at the store or something like this, that we don't have to be distracted by, magazine covers and things like this, National Enquirer headlines and things like that. You don't want to pay attention to crap like that, because if you do, you're going to plant a seed in your subconsciousness, which you don't want to develop those kinds of seeds. You want to develop seeds which are empowering and give you the knowledge and understanding which is within. And that's why we use the tarot cards as planting these seeds, these pictorial images into our subconsciousness. That's what we want to pay attention to the most, because that's what we want to become as our house of life. Really want to build our house out of these tarot images. So, with that said, I think, okay, so there's just a few more things I want to mention with how the tarot keys mutually explain each other, and then we'll get into some of the meditations that I had in mind. But some of the interesting things here, like I said, with the flowers and the idea of a garden, the magician as a gardener, that ties in very clearly with the Empress card. And now we also see on the Empress that there's also red roses in that card. So anytime we see the same symbol in two different cards, that we want to understand that those cards can mutually explain each other. Also, if we find relationships between the numbers, between the numerology of the cards, then we'll find also hidden understandings of how one card can bring out hidden meanings of another card. Like if we look at the Wheel of Fortune, it's the number 10. If we add the digits, this is the operation called reduction. If we reduce the number 10, we'll have 1 plus 0, which is 1. So when we reduce the Wheel of Fortune, we get the Magician. Now if we think, what's the hidden connection between the Wheel of Fortune and the Magician? Well, we see the big wheel on the Wheel of Fortune, and anytime you have circular motion, that creates a center, a point of concentration. And also we see on the Magician that the whirling energies are sort of shown here in the serpent belt and also the simple little white headband crown that he's got. Also, if we take the Sun card and reduce the digits, 1 plus 9, we get 10. So that ties to the Wheel of Fortune. And then, again, you reduce and get 1. So the Sun card can tell us things about the Magician. Now we see on the Sun card this big giant sun. And the thing here is that that there's solar energy is concentration of this energy, this life power energy. There's so many other ways we could look at that. It's going to have to wait for another time so we can get to the meditation here. Now, I just want to say some things. If you joined us on our show about gematria, then there are ways that the gematria numbers can bring out hidden meanings of the tarot cards. So if we take the letter Beth, which is the house. Now, if you wanted to spell the word house, if you were going to write it out in a sentence, you would actually spell out Beth, and it's spelled in English equivalents that would be B-I-T-H. And TH is, well, it'd be this in Hebrew. It's Beth Yod Tav. Now, if you wanted to bring out the hidden meanings of the Magician, you could do this. Take the cards for Beth Yod Tav and spread those out in order. So you'd have the Magician for Beth, you'd have the Hermit for Yod, and then the World for the Tav. Now, if you analyze that sequence, Magician, Hermit, World, that's going to bring out hidden meanings on the idea of a house, which you can use to further your understanding of the Magician. So that's just one example. Now, the intelligence of transparency, the word transparency in Hebrew is bahir, and that's spelled Beth He Yod Resh. Now, if you took that as tarot sequence, it would be Beth as the Magician, He as the Emperor, Yod as the Hermit, and Resh as the Sun. So Bahir, Beth He Yod Resh, you'd line those cards up. That would tell you things about the idea of transparency, which you could then use to understand more about the Magician. So some other things, I won't go into all the details. The number 1 in Hebrew is Echad, which is Aleph, Cheth, Daleth. The planet Mercury is Kokab in Hebrew, and that is spelled Kaf, Vav, Kaf, Beth. The Hebrew word for magician, I'm not quite sure how to say it, but the letters are Aleph, Mem, Gimel, Vav, Shin. And the gematria number there is 350. So if we went to our gematria dictionary, looked up the number 350, that would tell us things about the word magician. Okay, so there's tons and tons of things we could do with the gematria analysis of the tarot, but I just wanted to mention it so you know that it's there. But really what I want you to take away, the most important lesson of the magician is that you have to be very careful with what you're paying attention to, how you're using your power of attention, because you understand now that every act of attention is an act of magic, and we are doing magic all the time. Okay, so that takes care of the lessons and teachings. So let's get into the meditation here tonight. So let's just relax a little bit, take a few deep breaths. Have your magician card out in front of you and begin concentration on the magician. Now, if you know how to do rhythmic breathing, you can do, say, the fourfold breath and get into a deeper meditative state in that way. Now, every tarot card has a color and a musical note associated with it. The color of the magician is yellow. So let's imagine ourselves to be sitting at the center of a yellow sphere of light. And it's okay if you can close your eyes a second to build up that image, and then go back to the Magician card, or if you're skilled in these things, then you can simply imagine yourself to be sitting in a sphere of yellow light as you're sitting here contemplating the Magician card. Now the musical note is E natural, and I'm going to play E natural on the pitch pipe and hum it a few times, and that'll kick off our meditation as we go into the Sepher Yetzirah, followed by the Book of Tokens meditation. So again, this is the color yellow and the note E natural. The 12th path, Sechel Bahir, intelligence of transparency. The 12th path joins Kether to Bina. The Sepher Yetzirah, text on the 12th path. The 12th path is called the intelligence of the light, because it is the image of magnificence. It is said to be the source of vision in those who behold apparitions. A.E. Waite. The 12th path is the intelligence of transparency, because it is that species of magnificence called Chaz Chazit, which is named the place whence issues the vision of those seeing in apparitions. That is, the prophecies by seers in a vision. William Westcott. The 12th path is called intelligence of transparency because it is the image of that phase of Gedula, literally of that wheeling of Gedula, which is the source of vision in those who behold apparitions. Wade Coleman. Glowing consciousness. It is called this because it is the essence of that Ophon wheel of greatness. It is called the visualizer, Chaz Chazit, the place which gives rise to the vision that the seers perceive in apparition. Arya Kaplan. We will begin now with the Book of Tokens, Meditation on Beth. And so the way we want to read this is that it's the life power, the one I am, who's speaking these words through our consciousness. And so again, let's just tune up with the note E natural before this. Remember, this is the color yellow. One, and one only, am I in essence, changeless, indivisible, concealing within my being the 10 lights of divine emanation. In this, mine unalterable unity, am I supreme, and none is equal unto me. Yet though I myself remain unchanged throughout eternity, my power doth manifest itself in ceaseless change. They err who speak of my changelessness in essence, as if it were fixity in operation. That which changeth not is mine own nature, but this includeth the possibility of infinite diversity in ways and works. For the uninstructed, this is a stumbling block. Confused by words of double meaning, they perceive not that this, mine immutable nature, is an essence whose first ground is life, and not mere being. Thou knowest me not, O Israel, if thou regardest me only as he who is. They know me indeed, who know that I am he who liveth. I am life itself, and without mind there is no life. I am the essence of mind, and the essence of mind is will. Of my will, all created wills are but reflections, and the essence of that will, what is it but desire? I am life eternal, and I am the eternal longing for manifestation, because of which I bring forth the shining worlds. For this do I divide myself, becoming two. Of these two, the first is the crown of my primal will. This, my superior nature, standeth above the world, which floweth forth from mine active knowing. Yet even the superior nature is to mine inmost essence as something outside, and therefore is it to me as Beth, my house. For I am within it, and it is an emanation from me. Nevertheless I fill my dwelling place. Hence it is written that the Supreme is distinguished from the crown by name only. In my supreme abode I stand as the onlooker. Because of mine unwavering contemplation, the stream of manifestation continueth on its course. Whatsoever existeth hath its beginning in my will, continueth in my will, and by my will cometh at last to its appointed end. Than this, indeed, there is no other will in all the universe, yet in it do all creatures have a part. From my substance all things derive their substance, and all that hath form is built from my fourfold elemental manifestation. Four are the subtle principles, which the wise conceal from the uninitiate by the names fire, water, air, and earth. In endless variety of mixture and proportion, directed by my will, these mingle together for the production of forms. They are transmutations of a single essence, and from their mingling are brought forth all things. Watching thus the multiplicity of existences, proceeding from my single essence, I understand them in all their relations. I perceive that their beginning, middle, and end is in truth myself. Thus do I see that all things, despite their appearance, because they spring from mine own nature, are grounded in goodness. My superior nature is reflected also in the mind of man, created in mine image. Know me thus as the source of all true will. Know me also as the power to perceive objects as having the appearance of standing outside and apart from him who regardeth them. That in thee which so perceiveth objects, which giveth the power to distinguish between them, which revealeth them unto thee in their relations to each other and to thyself, and enableth thee to search out the laws of reciprocal action, know this to be identical with my superior nature. Wherever this power acteth, whether in low forms or in high, I only am its source, and I the knower. Not thine but mine is the power of attention, of observation, of discovery, of the discerning of sequence in the operation of nature. In all this, and in the power of discrimination, my superior nature worketh through thee. Now there's one more verse, but we're almost out of time, so I'm just going to have to wrap it up there, and I hope you guys liked that meditation. So I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. I hope you got a lot out of doing this show. We're going to be continuing on the rest of the major arcana very soon, with the High Priestess, the Empress, and so on, all the way down to the world, number 21. Don't miss any of it. Join us here on Symbolic Sorcery for the rest of that series, and thank you very much for listening, and have a great night.